Hey guys, Josh here with J&Z's Brewhouse to bring you the set review for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. We go over our thoughts and feelings of all the cards that we think will have an impact in both standard and historic constructed Magic, and if we're feeling the need, sometimes even a little bit of what we think about how they'll play out in limited. So first, we're going to cover the color white. So stay tuned. All right, guys, the first card on our docket is Enduring Angel. This is using I wouldn't say new mechanics, since this was in several Innistrad sets before, but the flip mechanic. So sometimes in the past, it was based only for werewolves when it was night or day. At nighttime, the werewolf would come out. But this one is activated on a trigger. So just going through the stats real quick: flying, double strike, and you have hexproof. So it's basically a built-in ley line. The white ley line that gives you hexproof. Also, I think most interesting about this angel is if your life total would be reduced to 0, you get a second chance. It transforms into its backside, which is the Angelic Enforcer, and it brings your life total back up to 3, which is really funny against certain red decks, I would think. And then on top of it all, when this Angelic Enforcer attacks, it doubles your life total each time. I definitely see this card at least being tried in both historic and standard. Historic gets a little harder because it's 5 mana and it does impact the board immediately when it comes down because it gives you hexproof right away. So against certain burn decks, that's interesting. However, the 3 toughness for 5 mana gives me pause. Red will easily be able to remove this. There is all kinds of removal that red can target with this to take it off the board. And in addition to that, creatures that don't have enter the battlefield effects are really hard to justify in certain colors, basically in constructed Magic most of the time. Creatures have gotten much better. I think Wizards has seen to that. We've seen the power creep on creatures, but we'll see. This definitely has a home in that Righteous Valkyrie deck that uses the life gain to make really fast big angels. But again, often that deck splashes green to run Coco. This is not a Coco target because it's 5 CMC. But in the standard 22, there was also an Angels deck, an Orzhov Angels deck that ran a lot of Angels, and this could definitely see a home in here too. I just don't know. I'm going to give it a 3. I don't know if it's not like a powerhouse card. It's got a lot of setup to it. It's pretty easy to remove. If itself had hexproof, this card would be off the roof in power level. So I'm kind of giving it a so-so rating here. All right, let's move on to the next card, Intrepid Adversary. Now, I'm much higher on this card than I am on Enduring Angel. There's already 2 decks, one in Constructed Standard and one in Historic, that will both use this card. You probably are familiar, if you played Standard 22 at all, with the mono white aggro deck that basically vomits its hand out on turn 4 with a bunch of 1-drops, efficient removal, disruptive creatures. And this guy is right at home with that. Great stats at 2 mana for a 3/1 lifelinker already. But what you love to see in a 2-drop is that it's as good when you draw it on turn 2 as, say, turn 4. And this guy fits that bill. If you can pump this guy up even once, it's basically a walking crusade. And notice that it pumps itself, by the way. It's not just other creatures get +1/+1 for each Valor counter on Intrepid Adversary. It's all creatures. So this guy will definitely see play. He's pretty good, I would say. I'm going to give him like a 4 out of 5. All right, let's move on to the Sigardian Savior. I like cards like this. This definitely reminds me of Vesperlark. Unfortunately, unlike Vesperlark, it won't fit in with the new combo. I don't know if you've seen this. Davriel's Withering, and Vesperlark is basically an infinite loop. You target Vesperlark with Davriel's Withering, and it keeps on coming back out of the graveyard because it's got this new enduring thing that doesn't matter if the state changes, if it goes into the graveyard or it's in play. It always has this -1, -2. So Sigardian Savior doesn't work that way because it's not about power, it's about CMC. Still, I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now that would be a wombo combo with this, but this card's going to be in Historic, and eventually someday it's going to get broken. And maybe I'm missing something right now. Somebody can probably tell me that there's 2 cards that if you can resurrect them from your graveyard, that will immediately end the game. So I see this definitely being played in the combo deck. It could also be find a home in the new Blink deck that is not really making a huge impact in Historic, but maybe it's just missing a few pieces to actually be impactful. In standard, I'm not so sure about this card. You know, the 2 CMC is kind of a bummer. If it was 3 CMC, I think this card would be way better. I mean, but then again, Ranger of Eos and the other one that targets really low CMC cards is impactful. So we'll see. You know, I'm going to give it a 3. And I think in Historic that, you know, in enough time, this is going to be part of some sort of combo deck. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, let's move on to Adaline Resplendent Cather. So this guy is a 3-drop, which I like already. Big body, you know, with 4 toughness. And it's kind of got that, you know, that Keldon ability, which is, you know, based on the amount of creatures you have in play. And think that is that's the power. So it basically starts as a 1/4 because it counts itself as a creature, of course. And it also has a built-in way to add more creatures. One of the things I don't like about this creature is that the white token has to be tapped and attacking. So if they have any board presence whatsoever, they can usually chump the white token and keep Adaline under control. But here's another interesting thing. It's not when she attacks necessarily, it's when anything attacks. So in a perfect world, you're curving out. You have a 1-drop, you have a 2-drop. Again, this is a human, so it fits right into that historic humans category. So your 2-drop could attack on turn 3 when she hits the battlefield and create a 1/1 token. This also triggers that new 2-drop white creature that gets +1/+1 for every human that enters the battlefield because this creates human tokens. So basically we've already seen 2 cards that the new historic humans deck, which already, to my understanding, has something like a 60% win rate, is going to want to try it out and see if they actually are good enough. And then on top of that, we're going to go into our next card, which will, I think, definitely see play in the humans deck, is the Brutal Cather. Not as good as Skyclave Apparition because just like Banishing Light or whatever, or Oblivion Ring, whatever you want to call it, this effect is seen play so many times in so many different iterations. Brutal Cather exiles basically a target creature. So it's also not, you know, planeswalkers, unfortunately, or enchantments or artifacts. But still, I think in regular standard, this guy's going to see play because here's the fun thing about him. When he does flip, he's a beater. He's a 3/3 first strike with ward, pay 3 life, which could be important because this guy, don't get me wrong, he's going to be in a beatdown deck. In limited, this guy is brutal. If you cannot remove this guy and they manage to flip him over multiple times, he's going to take over the game. He's going to eat all your big threats, and he's a beater himself. He plays defense with 3/3 first strike. So definitely an interesting card. Again, I think it's hard to replace him with Skyclave Apparition because of some of the limitations there, but I just like the fact that he can actually eat multiple creatures underneath him. So that is a lot of fun. So again, 3 amazing humans that came out of here that could all see play in the historic humans deck. I would think that of them, Intrepid Adversary is probably the most likely to see play in the historic humans, followed by Adaline, then followed by Brutal Cather. So Brutal Cather might be a sideboard card against really heavy creature decks. It's not so good against control decks, of course. All right, let's move on to the next card, Curse of Silence. So I'm actually very intrigued by this card. I've been running a green, white, blue, a Bant Enchantments deck in Historic that takes advantage of some of the new jumpstart cards that were printed, maybe namely Sithis, and also Sterling Grove. So the problem with that deck is it really lacks decent 1-drop enchantments. And I think this card could fit that bill, especially against control. Like on turn 1, you play Curse of Silence and you name Memory Lapse because, you know, if they're playing Jeskai, they're playing Memory Lapse, and that's the card you're most annoyed about. So that's actually hilarious. And then on top of it all, as the game goes late, you can sack this thing and draw a card if they play that card. So they've already paid 4 mana for the Memory Lapse, and then in response to casting the Memory Lapse, go ahead and sack it and draw a card, because by the time it gets to 4 mana anyways, it's going to be less impactful. So this is an interesting card in that very narrow application. I don't really see this seeing play in standard. I think it's not impactful enough. So I think that's the one application would be in the historic enchantments deck. I could be wrong, but so because it's so narrow in its application, I'm going to give it like a 2. All right, the next card, I am just kind of agog that they printed this. This is actually really interesting. Fateful Absence. I mean, this to me screams like a black removal card. uh, basically conditional removal, destroy target creature or planeswalker if controller investigates. Now, Drifter on MTGA Zone gave this a very low rating in Limited, because I guess he thought, well, basically you're 2 for 1 in yourself. You're removing their threat, but you're giving them a chance to draw another card. I disagree. I think you're going to want to high pick this in Limited. And here's my justification. Yes, they get to draw a card, but first of all, they have to pay 2 mana to do it, which is a tempo thing. And then number 2, you're going to be targeting their best card with this. You're going to be targeting some kind of 6-drop. And most Limited decks aren't running 6-drops. Yeah, I guess in a pinch, if you're really desperate, you'll remove something less than a 6-drop or something like that. But still, a removal with only 1 condition, and who knows, maybe they draw a land with it. It's not like it's the end of the world. And this is horrible for us in Jeskai. Jeskai is going to want to play this card. I want to play this card. I mean, a removal that targets both creatures and planeswalkers with, I would say, I'm going to go ahead and say it's a minor drawback. We play Declaration in Stone. That has a drawback too. It also gives them an investigation token. This is instant speed, targets creatures or planeswalkers. I love this card. I'm kind of partial to cards like this. I mean, I think that Baleful Mastery is a good card too on top of it. So, and this is, to me, this is even better than Baleful Mastery. Well, no, I guess it's about the same, honestly. But still, for white to have this card is kind of strange to me. This is kind of like Feed the Swarm. Like white does not have instant speed, planeswalker, or creature removal very often. The last kind of couple cards, were one of them's banned. It's Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares is not allowed to be played in Historic, even though they went ahead and printed it in one of the jump starts. And the other one was Path to Exile. And again, those are both 1-mana ones with conditions on them, and maybe the conditions aren't as good, but still, I think this is going to see play in both Constructed and Limited. Removal is removal, guys. So, and I might be wrong. I might be eating my hat on this one, but I love this card. All right, so we'll move on to Sigarda's Splendor. So another enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, note your life total, which I think is a very unique mechanic. This almost kind of feels like the perpetuity mechanic that they came out with, because it basically takes a lot of accounting. You could definitely do this in paper Magic. That's what you have a notepad next to you with a pen. But again, they're definitely playing in a new space here. I don't think I've ever seen a mechanic like that before. But anyways, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if your life total is greater than or equal to your last node life total. So this reminds me of that artifact that came out, that Cosmos of the Elixirs, where basically if you can gain life consistently enough, you can start drawing cards with it. And similar to Cosmos of the Elixirs, this one has a built-in way for you to gain life. So whenever you cast a white spell, you gain 1 life. I don't know what to think about this card. I'm sure it's going to have applications, but Cosmos of the Elixirs was also kind of goofy. It's really hard to keep your life total up against certain decks. If you're running this against a control deck that's not really pressuring you early and not getting a lot of damage in, sure, that's fun. It's hard for them to remove enchantments. They don't have, Jeskai doesn't have a lot of enchantment removal. Maybe Rip Apart will see play because of something like this, but who knows? But it's going to be narrow application. I mean, I'm going to give it like a 2. It might be more of like a casual card. It is an interesting card, though. I'll give it that. So we'll go ahead and move on to Sun Gold Sentinel. Now, this is very interesting. Basically, aggressively costed 2 mana for a 3/2, which is, a little bit under curve. But also, it's got a little graveyard hate built into it. And I love the fact that it's got both an enter the battlefield effect and an attack effect. And we've seen Wizards have done this a lot recently. A lot of cards have both these abilities stacked onto them, basically like the Titan chain back from like one of the core sets, Grave Titan, Primeval Titan, that both have the ETB ability and the attack ability. So that's fun. This will be great hate against all the Madness and Delirium decks that are running around to try to clean up their graveyard a little bit. In addition, it's a human. Again, another tool for the historic humans toolbox. Humans is getting a lot of good toys. And then on top of all that, this sucker basically has, I guess it's technically even better than protection from a color because it's hexproof, which I guess is relevant. As you know, if you give protection to, let's say, white on Sun Gold Sentinel and you happen to have a white aura on Sun Gold Sentinel, the white aura falls off and goes in the graveyard. So this would actually let you keep your white aura and also gives your creature unblockable. So it's basically like super protection because it's hexproof and unblockable, which is kind of what protection from white would do. But on top of it all, it lets you preserve any auras that might be on her. And I don't know that she'll see play in an aura deck. I think she's definitely going into a humans deck. So again, this is going to see play in standard and in constructed. This is probably one of the better cards I've seen so far. One of the ones I think most likely to see play, other than the Intrepid Adversary. The other thing to remember is that Innistrad's going to have Flashback and Disturb, so there's going to be a lot of graveyard shenanigans. So she shuts those down hard too. So really like this card. Going to give it a 4. Definitely going to see play. All right, let's move on to Vanquish the Horde. This is an interesting card. I wonder if this is in response to some of the token shenanigans that are coming, but we really haven't seen tokens get a foothold in either constructed or either in historic or standard. Maybe that's going to change. I'm not sure. If anything, this would be a sideboard card because it's pretty narrow for removal. You know, like it's definitely not replacing Wrath of God anytime soon. You know, you don't have to have a swarming battlefield. So it's kind of an awkward card, honestly. I wonder if 6 colorless mana was too much for it. Maybe it should have been 3 colorless mana. Just a way to make it actually, let's say they had 2 creatures on the board, then you can get a 3 mana Wrath of God. I mean, that would have actually been balanced. This card just is too overpriced for me, and there's too many other good board wipes in both in standard and in historic. I mean, this is not replacing Doomscar, guys. So I don't know. I guess it could. The white aggro strategy does go very wide very quickly, so this could kind of help get around that. But I just don't know. I mean, I still think Doomscar is probably a better card in that regard. So we'll see. At most, it's going to be a sideboard card. I'm going to give it a pretty low review. All right, so we finished up all our rares and mythics in the white block of Midnight Hunt, and we're going to move on to some of the commons and uncommons that I think that will be impactful and constructed. We're not going to talk about all of them, but our first card on the docket is Sunset Revelry, and this reminds me very much of Timely Reinforcements. Basically, if you're in the losing position, if you have less cards, less life, less creatures, you get a lot of value for 2 mana out of this. So I think could see play if you're running a white control deck. The last ability is probably not going to be relevant if you are the control deck, because generally you're going to be using this against the aggro deck, and you're going to tend to have more cards than them. So I doubt you'll get to draw a card out of it. But creating 4 life and 2/2/1/1 tokens for 2 mana is nothing to sneeze at. So it might see play. I'm going to move on to Candle Trap here, which reminds me very much of Sky Tether, which was a card, if you're familiar, in the Ravnica block that gave creatures Defender for 1 white mana. I like this card because it's a slight upgrade to Sky Tether, mainly because it says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by enchanted creature, which Sky Tether did not have. So now you can attack into that opponent and not worry about them trading or taking out one of your creatures with the Candle Trap creature, because it's basically going to sit there and its options are to be able to block something or chump, and that's it. And then on top of that, it has the new Coven ability. That's how you pronounce it, by the way. I had to look it up. Coven, not Coven, even though it's got an O. So Coven basically says if you have different powers, 3 different powers, you get to activate this ability. In this case, it gets to exile the creature. I like this card mainly because I think it's an upgrade to the Sky Tether in my enchantments deck. Again, looking for decent 1-drop white enchantments, which there's not very many of. So yeah, we're going to move on to Cather Commando. This is a very interesting card. I don't know that I've ever seen this on white before. Of course, white has enchantment and artifact removal. We're all familiar with disenchant and its various other effects like that. But this one is the first time I've seen it on a body. Normally, this is an effect reserved for green. I'm thinking about acidic slime or something like that. And then on top of it all, it's really aggressively costed. I mean, 2 mana for a 3/1 with flash is pretty good. So this has got a great floor aura ceiling because it's never a dead card. You might sideboard it against a deck that's running heavy enchantments or artifacts, and then you're not going to be sad when you draw it and they don't have an enchantment artifact, because you can still beat down with it. 1 mana more than, say, using a disenchant, but still, I think this is a very unique effect that white's going to want to have in their sideboard. All right, we'll move on to Lunarc Veteran. I'm highlighting this card mainly because of the new combo in Historic. If you're not familiar with the Soul Warden, Heliod, and Scurry of Oaks combo, basically that's a 3-card Infinity combo. When When you gain 1 life, obviously with Heliod, you put a +1/+1 token on something, and then when Scary Vokes gets a +1/+1 token, it creates a squirrel token, which would trigger the Soul Warden, and then it creates a loop. You just get more life, more squirrel tokens, keep on playing +1/+1s until you have a gigantic Scary Vokes with an army of squirrels and 1,000,000 life, and it basically gives your opponent 1 turn to respond or be overwhelmed by squirrels, which is a terrible way to die, I have to say. So this card might be slightly better than Soul Warden. The one drawback over Soul Warden is it doesn't have when your opponent gains or when your opponent casts creatures, which is actually sometimes relevant, but it does have Disturbed. The only bad thing is on the flip side, this Luminous Phantom side, it doesn't have the Soul Warden ability anymore. It's got a kind of a leaves battlefield, you gain 1 life, which Control would not care about. So I don't know. It might be better than Soul Warden, maybe not, or maybe it's just a replacement to it. I mean, that card, that combo deck also runs Prosperous Innkeeper, which I love that card because it's basically got a 1 mana rebate on it, or lets you ramp. So this might replace that, may not, but it's something to consider. The next card I'm going to talk about is Search Party Captain, which Morrow actually kind of teased us about when he does those riddles about what new set mechanics are coming out or what new cards are coming out in a set. He said there's going to be a card like Embercleave. I think when we were envisioning this, we thought maybe it's going to be a card like with like a rare or something like that, not a common. Though, look at this card and really analyze it on paper. The ceiling on this card is actually amazing. I don't know if it's going to see play in Historic, but I think in Standard, definitely, because basically this is going to go in that White Weenies beatdown deck. It is not hard for a White Weenie deck to attack with 2 or 3 creatures and get a significant discount on the Search Party Captain. So best case scenario, you attack with 3 creatures, and then you're paying 1 white mana for a 2/2 body that replaces itself by drawing a card. So that's a lot of value for 1 white mana. So this card could definitely see some play. Next is a more narrow card that will probably only see play in sideboards. I guess it depends on how prevalent spirits or enchantments, or I think Disturbed is definitely going to be prevalent in this next coming set. But basically, Thrab and Exorcism lets you take care of any of those, and exiling something with Disturbed is really good value, so it never comes back. And then the last card I'm going to talk about is the Chaplain of Alms. So, this may see play, may not. It's a human, which is relevant. Ward 1 is nothing to sneeze at. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but in a Death and Taxes type shell where you're already punishing your opponent for playing or for casting spells with mana, this is going to fit right in. And then on top of it all, it comes back with a much better body, 2/1 flying first strike, and still keeps the ward ability. So could see play just because there's not that many great 1 white drops out there, and it's got a relevant creature type. So that wraps up the white. We're going to move on to the blue next. Thanks for watching.